Sometimes the most dangerous creatures are not the wolves hiding in the forest, but the people who teach you that kindness makes you weak. Snow hammered against the crooked windows of Clara Whitmore's tiny cabin as she dropped the thick wooden bar across the front door with shaking hands. Outside, voices echoed through the dark streets of Black Hollow Pack. Men carrying lanterns moved from house to house while the distant howl of wolves rolled through the frozen mountains. "Search every building," someone shouted. "The Alpha King wants the beast found before sunrise." Clara pressed a hand against her chest, trying to steady her breathing, but her pulse only raced faster when a low growl came from beneath her bed. Slowly, carefully, she knelt on the cold wooden floor. The enormous black wolf hidden under the frame stared back at her with glowing golden eyes, its thick fur damp with melted snow. One of its front legs trembled weakly. Blood stained the old quilt she had shoved beneath it. "You need to stay quiet," Clara whispered softly. "Please." The wolf's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but instead of snarling, it lowered its head onto its paws like it understood her. Clara swallowed hard. She still didn't know why she had dragged the creature into her cabin an hour earlier. Maybe it was because she had seen hunters chasing it through the woods. Maybe it was because the wolf looked exhausted instead of violent. Or maybe it was because Clara Whitmore had spent her entire life protecting broken things no one else wanted. A loud bang slammed against the cabin door. Clara nearly jumped out of her skin. "Open up," a guard barked from outside. "Royal inspection." The wolf immediately tried to rise, a deep warning rumbling in its chest, but pain forced it back down. Clara reached beneath the bed before she could think twice and gently touched the side of its neck. Warm fur. Trembling muscles. A heartbeat stronger than any human's. "Don't," she whispered. "They'll kill you if they hear you." For one terrifying second, the wolf stared directly into her eyes. Then, impossibly, it went still. Clara pulled her hand back in shock. Wolves did not trust omegas. Not forgotten omegas like her. Especially not monsters this large. Another bang rattled the cabin. "Clara Whitmore," the guard shouted impatiently. "Open the door now." Clara stood quickly and grabbed the old medicine basket sitting near the fireplace. The sharp smell of herbs filled the room. She had been using those same herbs for years to secretly care for injured wolves abandoned after hunting accidents. No one in Black Hollow knew. If they found out, they would call her weak again. Pathetic. Useless. The omega no one chose. Clara took a shaky breath before opening the door a few inches. Freezing wind rushed inside instantly. 3 pack guards stood outside holding lanterns, their heavy boots covered in snow. Behind them, the entire village glowed beneath torchlight as nervous whispers spread through the streets. "Have you seen a black wolf pass through here?" one guard demanded. Clara lowered her eyes carefully. "No, sir." The tallest guard narrowed his gaze at her tiny cabin. "You live alone, right?" Clara nodded. "Then move aside." Fear hit her so hard it almost stole her voice. Behind her, hidden beneath the bed only 10 feet away, the giant wolf remained silent. Waiting. Watching. Clara's fingers tightened around the medicine basket until her knuckles turned white. And for the first time in years, the forgotten Omega realized that whatever creature was hiding inside her home tonight might change her life forever. The guards finally left Clara's cabin nearly 10 minutes later, but her hands still trembled long after their lantern light disappeared into the storm. She waited beside the door in complete silence, listening carefully to the fading sound of boots crunching through snow outside. Only when the village grew quiet again did she release the breath trapped in her chest. Behind her, the massive black wolf shifted weakly beneath the bed. Clara turned quickly and locked the door once more before kneeling beside the creature. "They are gone," she whispered. "You are safe for now." The wolf watched her closely, its golden eyes glowing softly in the dim firelight. Up close, it looked even larger than before. Its shoulders nearly reached Clara's waist even. While lying down, and the thick black fur around its neck shimmered silver whenever flames cracked inside the fireplace. It did not look like any wolf from Black Hollow pack. This one carried something heavier. Something ancient. Clara carefully reached for the damp cloth sitting in her medicine basket and dipped it into warm water. The smell of pine herbs and dried lavender filled the tiny cabin as Snow continued tapping against the windows. "This might sting a little," she said gently. The wolf remained still while she cleaned the long scratch along its leg. Clara frowned as she examined the injury more carefully. Whoever had chased this creature through the forest had not been ordinary hunters. The wound was too precise. Too deep. The thought made her uneasy. She wrapped fresh bandages around the leg before leaning back on her heels with a tired sigh. "You are lucky I found you first." The wolf blinked slowly at her voice. For some reason, Clara smiled. It had been a long time since anyone looked at her without disgust. Morning arrived pale and gray over Black Hollow. Smoke drifted from chimneys while pack members gathered nervously along the frozen streets. Clara pulled her old wool coat tighter around herself as she carried empty buckets toward the water pump near the center of town. People barely noticed her passing by, but whispers followed anyway. "That is the forgotten Omega. Still alone. No mate. No family." Clara lowered her gaze and kept walking. She was used to it. Black Hollow had decided years ago that she was unimportant. Omegas were meant to belong somewhere. To someone. Clara belonged nowhere at all. As she filled the buckets, a loud horn suddenly echoed across the valley. The entire village froze. Wolves began howling in the distance. Then came the sound of horses. Large black carriages rolled through the snowy entrance of the pack territory surrounded by armed guards wearing silver crests across their coats. Royal Guards. Fear spread instantly through the crowd. Clara felt it too. Everyone knew those markings. The Alpha King had arrived. A second horn blasted through the air as the largest horse stopped at the center of town. Then he appeared. Alpha King Damon Ashford stepped down slowly from the carriage, and the entire street seemed to stop breathing. He was taller than every guard around him, dressed in a dark coat lined with winter fur, snow collecting across his broad shoulders. Power rolled off him so heavily that several pack members instinctively lowered their heads. Even from 30 feet away, Clara could feel the pressure of his alpha aura pressing against the cold morning air like thunder before a storm. Damon's sharp gray eyes scanned the crowd once. "Someone in this territory," he said coldly, "is hiding my wolf." Silence swallowed the entire village. Clara's heartbeat nearly stopped. Because back inside her tiny cabin, hidden beneath her bed while the fire slowly burned low, the black wolf was waiting for her to return. Clara could still feel the weight of Damon Ashford's voice hours later as she hurried back through the snowy streets with her water bucket swinging at her sides. "Someone in this territory is hiding my wolf." The words echoed through her mind over and over again like distant thunder. By the time she reached her cabin, snow had already begun falling harder, covering the forest trails in silver frost. Clara pushed open the door quickly and slipped inside. Warm air from the fireplace brushed against her cold cheeks. The black wolf was still there. Relief softened her shoulders instantly. "I was starting to worry about you," she whispered. The wolf slowly lifted its massive head from the blanket beneath the bed. Its golden eyes followed her every movement while she crossed the room and placed fresh wood into the fire. Orange light flickered across the cabin walls, dancing over shelves lined with dried herbs and glass medicine bottles. Clara knelt beside the wolf again and carefully touched its bandaged leg. The swelling had gone down slightly. "That is good," she murmured softly. "You are healing fast." The wolf watched her in silence. Up close, Clara noticed something strange again. There was intelligence in its eyes. Not ordinary instinct. It listened whenever she spoke, almost as though it understood every word. A sudden knock at the door made Clara freeze. Her pulse jumped immediately. "Clara," a familiar female voice called from outside. "It is me." Clara exhaled in relief and quickly stood up. She cracked the door open just enough to see Martha Ellis holding a basket of bread beneath her thick winter shawl. Martha was one of the few older pack members who treated Clara with basic kindness. "I heard the royal guards questioned everyone this morning," Martha whispered nervously while stepping inside. "The whole town is terrified." Clara closed the door behind her. "People are saying the Alpha King came because someone attacked his royal wolf," Martha continued. "They say he has not slept in 2 days." Clara glanced toward the bed instinctively. Thankfully, the hanging blanket she had draped over the frame concealed the wolf completely. Martha lowered her voice further. "You need to be careful, child. The Alpha King is not known for mercy." Clara nodded quietly, but before she could answer, the wolf let out a faint rumble beneath the bed. Martha's eyes widened instantly. "What was that?" Clara's heart nearly stopped. "The pipes," she lied quickly. "The cold always makes strange noises in winter." Martha did not look convinced. Before Clara could speak again, shouting suddenly erupted outside. Boots pounded through the snow. A young beta ran past the cabin yelling toward the center of town. They found tracks near the eastern woods. Clara's stomach tightened. The wolf beneath the bed immediately became alert. Its ears rose sharply toward the sound outside. Then came another voice. Louder this time. Closer. "Search every home again." The wolf slowly crawled out from beneath the bed before Clara could stop it. Firelight spilled across thick black fur as the enormous creature stood fully upright inside the tiny cabin. Clara instinctively stepped backward. The wolf was even larger than she realized. Its head nearly reached her shoulder, powerful muscles shifting beneath dark fur while snow-colored eyes locked onto the door. No. Not snow-colored. Gold. Deep gold burning against the firelight. Then something impossible happened. The wolf moved toward Clara instead of the door. Slowly, carefully, it lowered its giant head. Beside her shoulder. Clara stopped breathing when warm fur brushed gently against her hand. The creature was asking for comfort. Outside, the sound of approaching guards grew louder with every second. Inside the cabin, the black wolf leaned against the forgotten Omega as though she was the only safe place left in the world. The pounding on Clara's cabin door came only seconds later. "Open up," a guard shouted from outside. "Royal inspection." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The black wolf remained pressed against her side, its thick fur warm beneath her trembling fingers. For one strange moment, the creature looked less like a predator and more like something exhausted from running too long alone. Another hard knock rattled the walls. "Now." Clara looked toward the door, then back at the wolf. "Please," she whispered urgently. "Hide." The wolf stared at her for half a second before slowly stepping backward into the shadows beside the bed. Clara quickly pulled the hanging blanket lower to conceal its massive body just as she opened the door. Freezing wind swept into the cabin along with 2 royal guards wearing silver crests across their dark coats. Their sharp eyes immediately scanned the room. "You live here alone?" one of them asked coldly. Clara nodded carefully. "Yes, sir." The taller guard stepped farther inside without permission. His boots tracked snow across the wooden floor while his gaze moved over the fireplace, the shelves of medicine herbs, and the stack of folded blankets near the bed. "We are searching every home," he said. "The Alpha King's wolf was injured somewhere near this territory." Clara forced herself to stay calm even as her heartbeat thundered painfully inside her chest. "I have not seen anything unusual." The second guard frowned while noticing the medicine basket beside the fire. "Why do you keep so many healing herbs?" Clara hesitated for only a second. "Winter sickness," she answered softly. "People come to me sometimes for remedies." The first guard looked unconvinced. He stepped closer toward the bed. Clara's stomach tightened instantly. Beneath the blanket, the wolf had gone completely silent. No growl. No movement. Nothing. The guard reached toward the hanging fabric when another voice suddenly echoed from outside the cabin. "Enough." The single word carried so much authority that both guards straightened immediately. Clara felt the air inside the room change before she even turned around. Alpha King Damon Ashford stood in the open doorway. Snow drifted behind him beneath the dark evening sky, but none of the cold seemed able to touch him. He looked even more intimidating up close. Tall. Sharp-featured. Calm in the terrifying way storms looked calm before they destroyed everything. His gray eyes swept across the cabin once before landing on Clara. The pressure of his alpha aura wrapped around the tiny room instantly. Clara lowered her gaze without thinking. Every instinct inside her body screamed at her to submit. Damon stepped inside slowly. "You are Clara Whitmore," he said. It was not a question. Clara swallowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." His gaze lingered on her for several quiet seconds. "You smell like pine herbs," he observed. Clara's fingers tightened at her sides. Damon looked toward the medicine basket near the fireplace. Then toward the bed. Clara stopped breathing. The room suddenly felt far too small. One step. That was all it would take. One step closer and he would discover everything. But instead of moving toward the bed, Damon's expression darkened slightly as though frustrated by something he could not understand. "My wolf was seen near this area," he said coldly. "If anyone in Black Hollow is hiding information from me, I will know." Clara nodded carefully even though her pulse refused to slow. Damon studied her face one last time before turning toward the door again. "Come to the town square tomorrow morning," he ordered. "Every pack member will be questioned." Then he walked away into the snow without another word. The moment the guards disappeared with him, Clara collapsed softly against the table, barely able to breathe. Behind her, the blanket near the bed shifted slowly. The black wolf emerged from the shadows and walked toward her in complete silence. Then, incredibly, it lowered its massive head gently into her lap as though trying to comfort her instead. Clara barely slept that night. The storm outside grew quieter as dawn slowly crept across Black Hollow, but inside the cabin the silence felt heavier than before. The black wolf rested near the fireplace now instead of hiding beneath the bed. Its breathing had become steadier during the night, though exhaustion still lingered in its golden eyes whenever it looked at her. Clara sat cross-legged beside the fire, carefully grinding dried herbs inside a stone bowl while soft orange light flickered across the room. "You should not trust me this easily," she whispered quietly. The wolf lifted its head at the sound of her voice. Clara gave a small smile despite herself. "Everyone else thinks I am weak." The wolf continued staring at her as though the words meant nothing. Outside, church bells echoed faintly through the snowy village. The questioning at the town square would begin soon. Clara's stomach tightened immediately. She knew what those gatherings were like. Pack leaders standing above everyone else. Omegas lowering their heads. Fear pretending to look like loyalty. Clara hated crowds almost as much as she hated being noticed. She stood slowly and reached for her winter coat hanging near the door. "I have to leave for a little while," she told the wolf softly. "Please stay hidden." To her surprise, the creature stood up almost instantly. Its massive body moved toward her with quiet determination. Clara blinked. No, the wolf continued forward anyway until it stopped directly in front of the door. A low rumble vibrated in its chest. Clara stared at it in disbelief. "Are you trying to stop me?" The wolf did not move. For one strange second, it almost looked annoyed. Clara let out the smallest laugh before covering her mouth quickly, shocked by the sound herself. She could not remember the last time she laughed around anyone. The wolf's ears twitched slightly at the noise. Then something unexpected happened. It leaned forward and pressed its forehead gently against her shoulder. Warmth spread through Clara's chest so suddenly it almost hurt. Nobody touched her gently in Black Hollow. Nobody stayed close to her unless they needed something. But this terrifying creature kept choosing her again and again. Clara carefully lifted one hand and rested it against the wolf's thick black fur. "You really are strange," she whispered. The wolf closed its eyes briefly beneath her touch. Then a sharp knock exploded against the cabin door. Clara jumped backward immediately. "Clara Whitmore," a harsh male voice shouted. "The questioning has started." The wolf instantly moved in front of her. Its golden eyes narrowed toward the door while a deep protective growl filled the cabin. Clara stared at it in shock. The sound was not angry. It was warning them away from her. Her heart pounded harder. "It is okay," she whispered quickly, placing a trembling hand against the wolf's neck again. "Please. They cannot hear you." Another knock came harder this time. "Open the door." Clara took a nervous breath before stepping around the wolf and cracking the door open slightly. Beta Marcus Hale stood outside with 2 guards beside him. Snow covered their coats while cold wind rushed through the narrow opening. Marcus glanced down at Clara with visible annoyance. "The Alpha King is waiting," he snapped. "Do not embarrass this pack more than you already do." Clara lowered her eyes quietly. "Yes, sir." Marcus turned away impatiently, but before leaving, his gaze briefly shifted past her shoulder toward the inside of the cabin. His expression narrowed slightly. Clara's pulse froze. Had he heard the growl? Seen the shadow near the fire? For one terrible second, Marcus looked ready to step inside. But then another guard called his name from the road, pulling his attention away. "Move," Marcus ordered coldly before walking off into the snow. Clara shut the door immediately and leaned against it with shaky hands. Behind her, the black wolf remained standing silently beside the fireplace. Watching her. Protecting her. And somewhere deep inside Clara Whitmore's lonely heart, something fragile had already begun changing forever. The town square of Black Hollow looked colder than the mountains surrounding it. Snow covered the wooden rooftops and gathered along the stone fountain in the center of the village while dozens of pack members stood silently beneath. The gray morning sky. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Fear had settled over the territory like another layer of winter. Clara kept her head lowered as she stepped into the square, her worn boots crunching softly against frozen snow. People noticed her immediately. They always did. Not because she mattered, but because she did not. "Why is she even here?" someone muttered nearby. "She's just the forgotten Omega." Clara pretended not to hear it. At the far end of the square, royal guards stood in perfect lines wearing silver armor beneath dark winter cloaks. And between them stood Damon Ashford. The Alpha King looked even more imposing in daylight. Cold wind swept through his dark hair while his sharp gray eyes moved across the crowd with terrifying calm. Power radiated from him without effort. Even the strongest alphas in Black Hollow avoided looking directly at him for too long. Clara tried to stay near the back of the crowd, but Beta Marcus spotted her instantly. "Whitmore," he snapped. "Front." Several people turned toward her at once. Clara's stomach tightened as she slowly walked forward through the snow. She could feel judgment following every step. Damon's gaze landed on her the moment she stopped near the front. Something unreadable flickered across his expression for the briefest second. Recognition. Curiosity. Maybe both. "Name," one royal guard ordered while writing notes across a parchment scroll. "Clara Whitmore." "Rank." "Omega." A few pack members smirked quietly behind her. The guard continued. "Have you seen unusual wolf activity near your property?" Clara forced herself to remain calm. "No, sir." Damon stepped forward slightly. The movement alone silenced the entire square. His gray eyes remained fixed on Clara's face while cold air curled around them both. "You live alone?" he asked. Clara nodded once. "Yes, Your Majesty." Damon studied her carefully. Too carefully. Clara suddenly became aware of everything at once. The scent of pine herbs still lingering on her coat. The trembling in her fingers from lack of sleep. The strange warmth in her chest whenever she thought about the black wolf waiting at home. Damon's gaze sharpened slightly though he noticed something others could not. Then suddenly a loud voice interrupted from the edge of the crowd. "Your Majesty." An older hunter stepped forward nervously and bowed his head. There have been rumors. Marcus frowned immediately. What rumors? The hunter hesitated before pointing toward Clara. People say she sneaks into the woods at night. Murmurs spread through the crowd instantly. Clara felt heat rush into her face. That girl always carries herbs, another voice added. I saw paw prints near her cabin last winter too. Maybe she feeds strays. Maybe worse. Marcus looked disgusted. You expect us to believe an Omega is hiding wolves? Clara opened her mouth to defend herself, but Damon raised one hand slightly. Silence fell immediately. The Alpha King kept staring at Clara as snow drifted slowly between them. Answer the question, he said quietly. Clara swallowed hard. She could feel every eye in the village burning into her. I help injured animals sometimes, she admitted softly. Whispering erupted across the square. Marcus laughed under his breath. Pathetic. But Damon did not laugh. His expression darkened instead. You treat wolves? He asked. Clara nodded carefully. Only when they are hurt. For a long moment, Damon said nothing at all. Then the wind shifted across the square. And suddenly his entire body went still. Clara felt it too. A strange electric tension in the freezing air. Damon's eyes narrowed slightly as though catching a scent impossible to ignore. Not fear. Not herbs. Something else. Something that made the Alpha King stare at Clara Whitmore like he was seeing her clearly for the very first time. The entire square seemed to hold its breath beneath Damon Ashford's stare. Snow drifted slowly through the cold air while dozens of pack members stood frozen in silence, watching the Alpha King focus entirely on Clara Whitmore. Clara could not explain the strange tension spreading through her chest. It felt like standing too close to lightning before a storm touched the ground. Damon's expression remained unreadable, but his wolf was restless beneath the surface now. She could feel it somehow. The Alpha King took one slow step closer. You heal wolves, he said quietly. Clara nodded once. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? The question caught her off guard. People usually mocked her for helping injured animals. Nobody had ever asked why. Clara lowered her eyes toward the snow. Because they are hurting, she answered softly. A few people laughed under their breath. Marcus folded his arms with open irritation. That is exactly why she is a problem, he muttered loudly enough for others to hear. Weak Omegas waste sympathy on creatures that should be left behind. Several villagers nodded in agreement. Clara stayed silent. She was used to their cruelty by now. But Damon did not look away from her. Left behind, he repeated coldly. Marcus immediately straightened beneath the weight of the Alpha King's voice. Your Majesty, she sneaks into the forest alone at night. Everyone here knows it. She hides wounded wolves instead of reporting them. Damon's gray eyes shifted slowly toward Marcus. The sudden silence that followed felt dangerous. And your solution, Damon asked calmly, is to abandon injured wolves during winter? Marcus hesitated. Weak wolves slow down the pack. Damon's expression darkened instantly. The temperature in the square seemed to drop with it. A true pack protects its own, he said. Nobody spoke after that. Clara looked up slightly in surprise. It was the first time anyone with power had defended her instead of humiliating her. Then suddenly a royal guard approached Damon quickly from the far side of the square. Your Majesty, he said under his breath. Fresh tracks were discovered near the northern cabins. Damon's eyes sharpened immediately. Whose cabin? The guard hesitated before answering. Clara Whitmore's. The entire square erupted into whispers. Clara's blood turned cold. Marcus looked triumphant instantly. I knew it, he snapped. She has been hiding something. Several guards moved toward Clara at once. Fear tightened painfully in her chest, but before anyone could touch her, Damon lifted one hand sharply. Every guard stopped immediately. The Alpha King kept staring at Clara as snow collected across his dark coat. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. Images flashed through her mind all at once. The black wolf sleeping beside her fireplace. The way it leaned against her hand. The loneliness in its golden eyes. Clara swallowed hard. She could lie. She should lie. But for some reason, looking into Damon Ashford's face made lying feel impossible. "I found an injured wolf near the woods," she admitted softly. Gasps spread through the crowd. Marcus stepped forward furiously. "You stupid girl. Do you realize what you have done?" Clara ignored him completely. Damon's gaze never left her. "Where is the wolf now?" Clara hesitated. The silence stretched painfully between them. Then Damon took another step closer. "Clara." Hearing her name in his voice sent an unfamiliar shiver through her chest. Not fear. Something stranger. Softer. More dangerous. "Where is my wolf?" Clara slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. And for the first time since this began, she realized something terrifying. Damon Ashford did not look angry anymore. He looked worried. Clara could not move. Snow drifted softly between her and Damon Ashford while the entire town square waited for her answer. The Alpha King stood only a few feet away now, his sharp gray eyes fixed completely on her face. But it was not anger she saw there anymore. It was fear. Real fear. The kind powerful men tried desperately to hide. Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "He is at my cabin." Gasps spread across the crowd immediately. Marcus stepped forward in outrage. "You brought a dangerous wolf into Black Hollow?" Clara flinched at the accusation, but Damon raised one hand instantly. Silence crashed down over the square again. "Take me there," Damon said quietly. Clara hesitated only a second before nodding. The walk back to her cabin felt endless. Royal guards followed several steps behind while villagers watched nervously from their windows and porches. Snow continued falling across the narrow streets, covering old footprints and frozen wagon tracks. Clara kept her eyes lowered during the entire walk, painfully aware of Damon beside her. The Alpha King said nothing, but his presence filled every inch of space around her. Strong. Controlled. Heavy with something restless beneath the surface. When they finally reached the cabin, Clara stopped at the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. "He is hurt," she said softly without looking up. "Please do not scare him." Damon stared at her for a long moment before answering. "I would never harm my wolf." Clara slowly opened the door. Warm firelight spilled into the snowy afternoon while the scent of pine herbs drifted into the cold air. The cabin looked exactly as she left it. Small. Quiet. Safe. And near the fireplace, the black wolf lifted its massive head immediately the moment Damon stepped inside. Everything changed at once. The wolf rose to its full height in complete silence, golden eyes locked onto the Alpha King. The air inside the cabin became charged with tension so intense Clara could barely breathe. Royal guards behind Damon instantly reached for their weapons, but Damon stopped them with one sharp motion. "Leave us," he ordered coldly. "Now." The guards obeyed immediately, shutting the door behind them. Silence filled the cabin. Clara stood frozen near the table while Damon slowly approached the wolf. Neither of them broke eye contact. Then, to Clara's shock, the enormous wolf walked directly past Damon. Straight toward her. The creature stopped beside Clara and pressed against her shoulder protectively. Damon went completely still. Clara looked up nervously. "I did not mean to steal him," she whispered quickly. "He was hurt and alone and I only wanted to help." Damon did not answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the wolf standing beside Clara like a guardian. Then slowly, something in his expression softened. "Do you know why nobody else could find him?" he asked quietly. Clara shook her head. Damon's voice lowered almost to a whisper. Because he chose to hide with you. Clara stared at him in confusion. Before she could speak again, the black wolf suddenly stepped away from her and moved toward Damon. Light flickered softly through the cabin fire as the massive creature stopped directly in front of the Alpha King. Then, impossibly, the wolf lowered its head, bowing. Clara's breath caught. Damon closed his eyes briefly, and a second later dark silver light rippled across the cabin floor like moonlight touching water. Clara stumbled backward in shock. The wolf's form began to shift slowly, dissolving into silver shadows that wrapped around Damon's body before disappearing completely into him. Silence crashed over the cabin. Clara stared in disbelief at the empty space where the wolf had been standing only seconds before. Damon opened his eyes again slowly. Gray now carried faint traces of gold inside them. You saved him, he said softly. You saved the part of me no one else could reach. Clara's heartbeat shook her entire chest. And then Damon Ashford took one slow step toward the forgotten Omega like he had finally found something he had been searching for all his life. The cabin remained completely silent after Damon's words. Clara stood frozen near the fireplace, her heartbeat shaking through her chest while silver firelight danced across the wooden walls around them. You saved the part of me no one else could reach. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not with gratitude. Not with softness. Damon stepped closer slowly, careful enough not to frighten her. Without the terrifying presence of the giant black wolf, he somehow looked even more dangerous now. More human. More real. Clara could still see traces of gold glowing faintly in his gray eyes. I do not understand, she whispered. Damon studied her quietly for a moment before answering. My wolf does not trust easily, he said. Not even with people inside my own kingdom. His voice lowered slightly. But he trusted you immediately. Clara looked down at her trembling hands. I only helped because he was hurt. Exactly. The answer came so softly it almost hurt. Damon glanced around the tiny cabin slowly. The old furniture. The worn blankets. The shelves filled with medicine herbs. Evidence of a lonely life hidden in every corner. You cared for him before you knew who he belonged to, he said. That matters more than you realize. Clara swallowed hard. Nobody had ever looked at her home like it was worth noticing before. Outside the cabin, voices suddenly rose near the road as more villagers gathered beyond the snow-covered fence. News traveled fast in Black Hollow. Especially impossible news. Damon heard them too. His expression darkened slightly before he turned back toward Clara. Come with me, he said quietly. Clara blinked in surprise. What? The pack needs to hear the truth. Fear immediately tightened inside her chest again. No, she whispered quickly. Please. They already hate me. Damon's gaze softened in a way she would never have believed possible from a man like him. Then they will learn. Before Clara could answer, Damon reached for her hand carefully. Slow enough for her to pull away if she wanted. She should have stepped back. Every instinct told her to. But instead, Clara let his fingers close gently around hers. Warmth spread through her entire body instantly. Not power. Not fear. Safety. Damon guided her outside into the falling snow. The entire village had gathered near the cabin now, watching nervously beneath the gray afternoon sky. Marcus stood near the front with visible confusion written across his face. The moment Damon appeared beside Clara, silence fell across Black Hollow. Damon kept hold of Clara's hand as he faced the crowd. This Omega, he said calmly, saved my life. Shock rippled through the villagers immediately. Marcus frowned in disbelief. Your Majesty, she hid your wolf from the pack. Damon's expression turned cold instantly. She protected him while the rest of you hunted him through a snowstorm. Nobody dared speak after that. Damon stepped slightly closer to Clara without letting go of her hand. You called her weak because she showed kindness, he continued. But kindness is the reason your king stands here alive today. Clara's eyes widened slightly. She could feel dozens of stunned faces staring at her from every direction, but for the first time in her life, nobody looked at her with pity. They looked uncertain. Ashamed. Damon turned toward Clara then, his voice quieter now. Meant only for her. My wolf chose you long before I understood why. Clara's breath caught softly. Snow drifted slowly around them while the village faded into silence behind her. Damon lifted her hand carefully and pressed it against his chest, directly over the steady heartbeat beneath his coat. You were never forgotten, he said. You were simply waiting for the people worthy enough to see you. Tears burned unexpectedly in Clara's eyes. She looked down quickly, embarrassed, but Damon gently lifted her chin. There was no mockery in his face. No cruelty. Only warmth. Only certainty. And as the winter wind moved softly through Black Hollow Pack, the forgotten Omega finally realized something life-changing beneath the silver sky. The lonely wolf she saved in secret had not only found his way home. He had found hers too.